Good morning, afternoon, evening, everybody. I believe we are live. Yes. Very good. Here's coming through. Tune some things here and there as we're getting ready here on a Tuesday evening. Konbanwa, guten Abend, all that good stuff. Buenos noches, wherever from the world you are hailing from. Welcome in, I hope you're doing alright. I will not lie to you guys, it has been quite a day. Full of, let's call it interesting things around the office today. I'm not going to get into it just because, I think there's a level of respect to be had in keeping things a little bit more private, but, as well as, God forbid, some of my coworkers find that I stream here, I would prefer not to be caught with a foot in my mouth. But let's just say there have been some interesting and trying times. But now the day is over. We've moved into evening. I have a cold beer next to me. The time after work, after overtime, has been good. And it's time for us to play some Witch on the Holy Night. So let's go ahead and get... Oh, where'd the model go? Uh-oh. Where's he gone? Did I accidentally close it? I think I might have. Ooh, there we are. There we are. How are we doing today? Now that we can see each other. That's good. If you are of legal drinking age and drink responsibly, I highly recommend Asahi Super Dry. It's nothing fancy, there's no frills around it. It's just a good, solid, kind of a lager-esque type beer. It's very good. Very, very good. Kanpai. Alright. So now if I remember correctly, we had the big school scene where our boy Sojiro and Tobimaru, the vice pres of the student council, were in a big conversation, and there was a bit of a backstory dump as far as Alko goes and her scary reputation. But also, we had a little bit of a misunderstanding where Tobimaru thinks Sojiro has fallen head over heels in love with Alko, which couldn't possibly lead to any misunderstanding whatsoever. I don't see how this could end poorly, ever, really. I mean, when does that ever cause an issue? Let's see, let's move this over here, so where I can see. There we go. Let's continue where we left off. Alright. School day over, Sojiro headed straight to his job. What an industrious lad. While the school had approved his jobs at the Chinese restaurant and fish market in Misaki's shopping district, there was other work he hadn't mentioned to them. And it was not because he knew that they would complain at him working too many, but rather because of the illicit nature of one job in particular. Today, his workplace was a pachinko parlor in front of Yashirogi Station. Sojiro changed out of his school uniform and into a black faux tuxedo uniform, then began cleaning the storefront. Pachinko parlors are fascinating establishments. I have been around them, although I haven't partaken myself when I was in Japan. Maybe I'll do that a little bit when I go next time. My understanding is that it's kind of like slots, but you get these little ball bearings or other type of token that come out, and then you exchange those for quote-unquote prizes at another place. Yashirogi, meanwhile, was the jewel of Misaki City, a busy place with a vast assortment of commercial centers and shopping arcades. Where there were people en masse, there were products made en masse. A romantic might describe it as a place of joy. A realist would note the free enterprise. and a cynic would point at all the garbage. Now that's hard to believe in Japan, because especially if you're an American like me or come from another country, that in Europe, I imagine, in many places, it is much, much cleaner than pretty much anywhere I've been in the States. Local authorities had attempted to beautify Yashiroki, but there was one basic tenet of society they could not overcome. This establishment was the embodiment of that rule. Businesses such as this attracted the dregs of society, rude, and as such, the front of the parlor had to be cleaned several times a day. Sojiro stood outside in the winter cold, sweeping used-up cigarette butts, picking up discarded flyers, and tossing empty cans into the trash. Something about it must have reminded him of mountain life, because he cheerfully finished the job with ease. After making sure the storefront was acceptably clean, he returned to the inside of the parlor, where it was nice and warm. Blinding lights, deafening sounds, and the oppressive odor of tobacco assaulted him as he passed through the parlor on his way to the office. Here's something that might be an easy analog if you're not familiar with pachinko. It's very much like a casino. Like you step in there and a lot of them are very casino-esque.
店長、外回りの掃除終わりました。
はい、ご苦労様。それでいいかな。2階の40番台のお客さんの様子見てきてくれない？どうも懐に飲んでそうなんだよね。
We might have a cheater on our hands. We can't have that. The house always wins. His boss was a good-natured man who used to work a desk job. The reason he employed someone like Sojiro, even though he was clearly a student, was not because he admired him for working his way through school. It was because all the other employees were scary and intimidating, and he wanted at least one employee who was not.
いいんですか？トイレの掃除まだですけど。
いいのいいの。なんかね、カメラの死角にいるんでいまいち確証取れないの。そうちゃん、今のところ的中率 100% でしょ。様子見てきてくれないかな。
Hearing that, Sojiro put away his cleaning equipment and headed upstairs. It was a typically large-scale pachinko parlor with 2 floors. It prided itself on being a local establishment that was satisfied with taking the locals' money little by little, without resorting to more exploitative means. But regardless of the parlor's intentions, its customers were not so scrupulous. Among them were casual players, professional gamblers, and cheaters looking to profit by exploiting whatever loopholes they could find. Of particular prevalence was a device developed in the mid-80s that could disrupt a machine's circuitry from the outside and make it much easier to get what was called a 777 jackpot, like slots. As much as the parlor wanted to deny these cheaters entry, it needed to present hard evidence of cheating or risk losing customers. Particularly in the service industry, innocent until proven guilty was not a rule taken lightly. As a result, they could only punish the customers they caught in the act. Such cheaters were known as gotoshi, a slice of society which Sojiro knew nothing about. What he did know was that they were inconveniencing his employer and violating their rules. He went upstairs. The radio and game machine sounds on the second floor were quieter than the cacophony downstairs. There were 100 game machines on the ground floor and over 80 on the second. While there were some empty seats here and there, it was a solid evening turnout. The machine mentioned by his boss was in the center aisle. Kind of a conspicuous place. Sojiro nonchalantly leaned back against the wall and watched the customer hit the jackpot over and over again. Well, that's suspicious. Oh. The second he saw her, his gut told him that she was not cheating. Give me a second here as I put up my hair. Just got out of the shower, so it's all over the place. And there we go. I love having long hair, but it is definitely more of a challenge to keep up. There we go. He still was not sure what made someone a master swindler, but if it meant they were special, This woman certainly fit that description. It was almost as if he could feel the luck emanating from her. As the customers looked on, she silently turned the handle again and again. Look at that smile. She appeared older than Sojiro. She wore a green, form-fitting, one-piece dress. A pair of stockings covered her legs. Her slender legs were gracefully crossed, and her elegance suited a painting better than a casino. Alright, Sojiro, stop describing her legs. You already sold me. Her dark, reddish hair was cut short in a bob, perfectly framing her stylish spectacles and crimson lips. Truth be told, something was off about this picturesque beauty ringing the jackpot over and over again. 4 boxes worth of pachinko balls sat at her feet, and her winning streak showed no sign of abating. She looked bored as her slender porcelain fingers lifted a long cigarette to her lips. Feels like I've seen her somewhere. Just as that thought crossed his mind, her gaze turned towards the wall and Sojiro. Spooky. Suddenly, a chill ran down his spine. He reflexively covered his mouth to keep from shrieking. Ah, if you remember last time, Sojiro had told a story about 2 magic users getting into a fight, which he was roundly confused by, and assuming that just about anything could happen in a city, assumed it was a normal part of life, or could be. Alright. And he's gone. Acting on pure instinct, Sojiro took off running. He headed straight downstairs, desperate to not be on the same floor as her. He would have run straight out the door but for his obligation to his job. Homeboy said he is out. He is freaked. He tried to keep his composure as he spoke, jamming his school uniform into a paper bag as he ran out of the parlor. Cloudy weather brought the shadow of night over Yashirogi as he ran through the shopping arcade towards the station. He shot up the long staircase like an arrow, quickly pulled his train pass from his wallet and passed through the ticket gate. The ticket gate was crowded with people standing around, walking and talking. The station attendant by the automatic ticket machine had an unpleasant look on his face. There was now a familiar, comforting hustle and bustle around him. Just another day in the city. Nothing like what he witnessed the night before. Whew. He could finally breathe again. The momentary rush of relief brought him to an abrupt stop. He nervously turned around. There was no way that dangerous individual could be behind him. He couldn't think of a good reason for why he'd fled so desperately. As far as he could remember, he hadn't even seen the threat's face long enough to form an opinion about her. Sojiro gave himself a good slap on the cheek to pull himself together, and quickly made his way down to the platform. Unfortunately, the next train was 10 minutes away, and panicking would do him no favors, so he quietly found an empty seat and sat down. I've never seen him get so excited about anything before. He took another deep breath. He was surrounded by people waiting for the train just like he was, and no sign of anyone pursuing him. His head finally cleared up, and he assured himself that he was overthinking things, though he was surprised at how heavy his shoulders felt. The boy's got good sixth sense, that's for sure. Sojiro sighed at his greater than expected fatigue. He had certainly struggled since coming down from the mountains, but in retrospect, it could have been worse. Physically, he was probably holding up fine. He was much less confident in his mental state. At least he's aware of it, but not the greatest thing to be thinking at the time. The city and the mountains could not have been more different. He had been slow to recognize the differences and adapt. Acclimation was simple enough. Humans were nothing if not adaptable. Even without any effort, one could learn to adjust over time. Recognizing the challenges had been the hard part. I feel that. moving to a completely different place definitely got its challenges, even if I didn't come out of the mountains into the city. Sojiro grumbled a complaint he had never uttered before. To be honest, he was still afraid to wander around town. There were so many things city people took for granted that Sojiro had yet to grasp. It was little wonder that this never-ending chain of surprises would wear on him.
そっか。疲れてるのは体じゃないのか。だからあんな幻を見る。
He muttered to himself, then shook his head. That which exists, exists. Such was the way of things. Tobimaru had called it a hallucination, but Sojiro knew what he saw was real. The city was a magical kingdom compared to the mountains. If there were real magicians secretly living here, haha, that should have been no surprise at all. The thought alone made his legs tremble. It took him a moment longer to realize that they were quivering out of fear. He had feared the unnatural ever since he encountered a wild bear on a mountain path as a child. Bears are scary. I used to work with bears, actually. I used to work at a zoo.
いや、あれはこんなもんじゃなかったっけ。なりふり構わず泣き叫んだもんな、あの時は。
Sojiro smiled a little as he recalled his traumatic childhood memory. Here you go. You gotta enjoy the spicy memories. You can't let them beat you down. Anyone would have fainted at the sudden appearance of a growling beast that towered over 6 feet tall. The monster in the movie that Sojiro saw not 2 days ago was the equivalent of a cuddly stuffed animal when compared to the wild mountain creatures. He was reminded that he'd faced far worse before, and his ordeal now was something he could endure.
そうだよな。今の問題はとちらっと聞こえた最後のセリフか。
Catch and eliminate.
捕まえて始末する。
Homeboy, I think they were talking about you.
どう
At face value, the meaning was obvious. But the implications, they were simply too frightening to contemplate seriously. Perhaps he had misheard the words, or perhaps the speaker had misspoke.
戦いのルール。誰かがきっと罰しに来る。か。
Even as he said it, the idea didn't feel quite real. It was hard to imagine that it applied to him. Sojiro breathed in and closed his eyes. His vision dimmed, putting the illuminated cityscape out of sight and out of mind. For now, he resolved to put last night's events behind him. When he opened his eyes, his breathing had calmed.
それでさ、青崎を殴りつけようとして結局どうなったんだ、飛び戻り。
My guess is Tobimaru got his butt whooped. The question suddenly popped into Sojiro's head. He decided he would ask next time, and stood up from his chair. A long streak of light blazed by, announcing the arrival of the next train. I'm stumbling over my words today, I apologize. Nights. Time for our next episode. But first, let's go ahead and throw down a save. Can never be too cautious. Then let's go to the next episode. Chapter 3. Nights. Nights as in Dark Knights, not as in, like, Armor Knights. Or Dark Knights as in Christian Bale's Batman. Alright. Let me tell you how the events of yesterday transpired. On moonless nights, you must never look back. Was it a lesson, or was it a warning? It was so very long ago. At the time, I could not have imagined what my very being, would become. One night, it came without warning. I was filled with an anxiety so heightened that it made me want to burst into tears, so I fled to my grandfather's workshop. Unlike the grandfather I knew, he smiled and kindly placed his hand upon my head. Yes, the Red Death follows you at every step. Rather than consoling me, he sent me home with only those haunting words. That night, I was certain that I sensed a shadow lurking behind me. Something or someone watching me from afar. Then little by little, year by year, it drew closer. Eventually, the presence that once felt like a spot on the horizon grew so close that I could feel its breath down the base of my neck. Of course, it was all in my mind. When I turned around, nobody was there. But that night marked the beginning. In hindsight, I later understood that the indescribable anxiety I felt was the dread of certain death. How much time had passed since that night? It lingered deep in the recesses of my mind where childhood memories are kept. A faded, storybook-esque memory. On dark nights, I still hear the faint echo of my grandfather's words. But no matter how strong the wind may howl, or how entrancing the song of the girl next to me, I could never bury his ominous words completely. Ooh, Miss Alice, the girl beside me said. Alice's inflectionless voice spoke volumes of her role as the bystander. That night, there was only me and her. It was the night I would mark as the birth of who I am today. For what should have been quite the memorable night, it sure wasn't a promising start. Dense clouds blocked the starlight above like a black umbrella. Strong wind tore through the sky, carrying the heavy clouds with it. The hands on the clock in the middle of the park pointed skyward, as if reaching for the moon. Reach for the moon, immortal smoke. Unfortunately for them, tonight there was no moon to point at. The winter air grew fiercer as the night wore on. Inhaling felt as though it would freeze me from the inside. That is a miserable feeling, by the way. I hate having to be out in intense cold. The air chilled me to the bone, threatening to pass up my spine directly to my brain. To prevent my mind from being paralyzed, and to prevent my fingertips from becoming stone, I sparked a fire using my internal rhythm and emotion.
触覚を譲るわ。幸運ね。あの位置なら刻んでおいたウィスプが止まる。
I responded to Alice with a nod. And then, for just a moment, I saw the ground. My legs quivered ever so faintly. I told myself they were shaking from the cold, but I wasn't so sure. In reality, they might not have been numbed by the cold, but by fear. I breathed a sigh of relief. My humanity must still be intact if my emotions are still present. Before I could sink into a pool of my own sentimentality, the sensations from the bounded field flowed from Alice into me. A transparent wall covered the entire park, an unrecognizable carpet rooted deep under the earth. Alice Kuonji's chants of the Mother Goose fairy tales permeated the night. The sensations became one with my body. I felt goosebumps on my quivering right arm. Someone had trespassed. The goosebumps crept up my right arm like ants, and slowly but surely made inroads for my heart. Holding back the desire to drive them out, I waited for them to reach a certain definitive position. A moonless night. The park's quaint street lights were not enough to lift the darkness. The ants came to a stop. Far, far from my right arm, they had reached my very heart. Even without the aid of my sense of sight, I could see the intruder lurking in the darkness. To starboard, in the bushes about 30 steps back, on all fours. It was beckoning with its right hand. Soko! Soko? The enemy's movement, and my perception of it were in lockstep. I spun around. Whoa. Flex Armstrong. The enemy's arm stretched out like a spear. This lethal weapon, aimed at the back of my head, brushed my hair at a breakneck speed. With the omniscient awareness granted by Alice's ward, I managed to avoid it by the skin of my teeth. My hair fanned throughout the air from the violence of the attack. The strike grazed my cheek and I felt a small, sharp pain. It felt like the kiss of death. I switched the flow of my body's blood to a different cycle. The blood running through my veins at a few feet per second transmuted into an imaginary element. My body became a single circuit, and my heart transformed into a completely different engine. Within me stirred an unknowable motion of immeasurable heat, something mystic, yet untapped by humankind, that made me who I am. It was the fire of life behind all miracles and fables. What we mages called magical energy.
セット。
I turned around, set the enemy in my sights, and held up one hand. My arm was the agent of my will. My lack of experience meant my magecraft would only be possible with the use of vocalizations and gestures. Magical formulae were engraved all over the park. All I had to do was ignite them. I needed to direct the flow of the magical energy within my body to each formula. Typically, a mage acts as a conduit. Whether wired or wireless, the mage simply pours magical energy into the formula. Releasing this energy in the form of projectile, stream, or any number of other methods would usually suffice. But in my case, it was the feeling of my limbs whipping out.
燃えろ！
Did we get a direct hit? It was so powerful we're slowed down on the visual novel. I fought speed with speed. Ooh, is that a doll joint? The enemy's arm, extended 10 feet forward, became engulfed in flames. It was nighttime at the park, a scene reminiscent of a campfire, but one in which the center of the flames contained a humanoid figure wriggled like a shadow puppet. The flames subsided just as unnaturally as it had ignited. No crackling, no burning smell.
結界返すわ。死体を確認するから。
So just as a quick aside, this bounded field that they had talked about is sort of like a mage's area of influence, you could think of it. They can set up these areas they can do certain things. Like they might tell you that someone's there, they might protect an area or keep people out. They might have some sort of effect that they can use, like a glyph of warding, for example, in D&D, if you're familiar with tabletop RPGs. All kind of cool stuff. Some of them can even move. If you've watched the Kar no Kyokai movies, the Garden of Sinner movies, there is a character later on that you see in, I believe the first time you see him use it is in movie 5, where he can use bounded fields that are centered on himself and will move with him, which is pretty cool. After telling this to Alice, along with my side conversation with you guys, I headed towards the motionless figure. I killed it. I killed it. I killed it. Regardless of who my opponent was, I just took someone's life. My throat parched. I swallowed the truth that without this sense of reality, I would have been helpless. So hard and bitter, impossible to swallow. But I tried to anyway. I was unnervingly calm. My heart pounded and my breath felt heavy, but my mind was nonetheless calm. By the time I realized it, the charred remains were already in front of me. Bracing for a counterattack, I carefully examined the corpse. Everything seemed fine. This body lying slumped to the ground was nothing but ash. Nani? But something wasn't right. To begin with, its remains didn't smell organic. Not willing to believe my hunch, I took a closer look at the corpse's face. All that greeted me was the featureless white face of a mannequin. Something tells me they've been playing cat and mouse. I'm not sure who the cat and who the mouse is, though. Screaming, I kicked the mannequin. Damn thing. The corpse crumbled to ash and disappeared with the wind. No, this was no corpse. This was just a puppet. And for all our efforts to lure the master out, we had once again been tricked by a familiar. My debut, my first test out in the open, would be postponed for another day. Someone's screwing with him. At that moment, I suddenly noticed something familiar in the corner of my eye. Something seemed strange about the slide on the other end of the park. It appeared as though its shadow were larger than it should be. Was I still drunk on the high of battle? It took me a second to realize what it was. Uh-oh. Calling out was a mistake. Startled by my voice, the figure, wearing a familiar high school uniform, took a step back, and then it broke into a sprint, like someone running for their life. Or should I say, he was doing exactly that. Uh-oh. In a rush, I shouted to my partner, but she hadn't even noticed the third party's presence in the first place. Though, it wasn't as if I could move by myself. Embarrassingly, the fight had taken more out of me than I'd have liked. Uh-oh. Well, now we've come full circle. So now we know that was Sojiro who'd been watching Aoko fighting a familiar of another mage, specifically a puppet, so we're dealing with a puppet master. And if you're familiar with the lore of Fate, mages, they are not very fond of people outside of their circles catching wind of what they do. In fact, that's kind of a big deal, so he might be on the chopping block. We're gonna have to find out. There's no time for niceties. For us, being seen here was a matter of life and death. Shaking off the numbness in my legs, I made for the park's exit. I had to admire his escape. The witness, party to the entire night's proceedings, had disappeared into the darkness of the residential district without a trace. Now that is weird. Because he would have been in the bounded field in the park, like we discussed, one of the things the bounded field can do is detect when people are in it. Complaining to myself wouldn't bring back the figure in uniform. Bitter at my own incompetence, I gave up the damn chase. Though temporary, the park had become Alice's woods, quote-unquote. For anyone within a few feet of the park, other park-goers' identifiable features and voices became murky, like the stuff of fairy tales. Tonight's proceedings may have had a witness, but if our identities were still hidden, then this was still a chance. I returned to the park. That uniform was, without a doubt, from my high school. That was clue enough. If he was a schoolmate of mine, I had plenty of methods to flush him out. Amidst my grumbling, I set my priorities straight. Before some strange rumors spread, I needed to seal the witness's mouth shut. That was the highest priority, quickly and without mercy. No witnesses. Looking up, I saw Alice's previously distant figure. Though she was in as much trouble as I was, with her existence as a mage also exposed, she had but one thing to say. If only you knew, Alice. Her statue-like figure, staring into the darkness, seemed more expressionless than calm. I was pissed off. Her inscrutable voice resembled the moonless night so much it made me angry. Chapter 3 finished. On to Chapter 4. Blues in her name. But let's give a save first. Never a bad idea. Ooh. Ah, boo. Let's see. We can get that fixed pretty quick, though. I'd like to play a little bit more before we call it a night. Let's see here. There we go. Launching again. Alright. Let's see here. Actually, we can use that as a good point to relaunch all our stuff here. Make sure everything's working. Oh dear. That's not what we want. Let's use this. Apologies for the technical difficulties, my friends. Give me a second here as we get some things sorted out. There we are. We can add that back in. Perfect. Now the game does autosave, so let's see if we can keep on going. Ah, dear. Let's see. Yes, that's at nights. So we'll just run through this pretty quick. Next scene. Oop. Oop. Let's see here. Well, it's not one to work with me, is it? So we'll just power through all this. That'll give us a good chance to talk, you and I. How are you guys liking the visual novel so far, if you've been keeping up? One thing I did want to mention is that I really like Alice's kind of theming. She's a little bit different from normal mages, being a witch, which we'll learn more about that as we go through the story, as we get caught up to where we were. A lot of her magic actually revolves around fairy tales, specifically nursery rhymes. It's really cool. I quite like it. I like the theming around it. It takes this thing that a lot of us, at least myself, I grew up hearing a lot of nursery rhymes and that sort of thing growing up. So it takes this thing that's familiar and mildly comforting, right, from childhood, and gives us a very different perspective on it, right? It kind of shifts the expression of it and uses that as a springboard for a really interesting imaginative interpretation of what they might be if they were spells. And we'll see some more of that, and we'll get a little bit of explanation as well as we go through the visual novel. And I hope you guys are looking forward to that, because it will be pretty good. Fortunately, this chapter is fairly short, so we will be caught up in just a moment. Now, Aoko, on the other hand, I mentioned Alice's magic. Aoko is a bit more... how would I put it? She is the hammer to Alice's scalpel, in many ways. She's got a lot of raw strength, but she's very rough around the edges. She needs a little bit of mentoring, a little bit of guidance. That said, if one of her bolts, like what we just saw, her torch that puppet with, hits something, that's not gonna be a good time. So do be careful of that. Or well, I suppose I should tell Sojiro to be careful of that. Alright. And here we are again. let's go ahead and put that save down. And we'll go on to the next episode here. Let's keep going for a little bit longer. I would like to anyway. Let's pull this up. Go over here. Then grab this. There we are. Chapter 4. Blues in Her Name. There really isn't any other way of saying this. I'm a magician. Kind of like those witches in fairy tales who live alone in the woods and perform miracles with the wave of a finger. While the popular depiction of it differs from reality, it's closer to the truth than you know. Though, just so we're clear, no, I don't fly through the sky on a broom, although that would be cool, like Kiki's delivery service. I cannot transform into animals or speak with small birds. Modern mages are nothing so fanciful. Our existence sounds unbelievable, but we're quite grounded. Though it may seem like we can do anything, we're actually majorly constrained. And while I still have a lot to learn about it, this is my real job. Sounds a lot more romantic than being a high school student, right? Naturally, this is a secret I don't just share with anyone. A mage must do everything in their power to conceal their work. That is the first and most important of the association's 10 laws. Not that I'm tempted to let the cat out of the bag in the least. My secret identity as an honor student is intact, and absolutely no good would come of me revealing my true nature. If anything, it'd only lead to more headache. That is why I do everything in my power to keep it a secret. Of course, if I'd accomplished anything as a magician by now, then maybe I'd see it differently. I've fantasized about revealing my secret life's work to a single, special person when I finally make something of myself. Yeah, it'd be pretty stellar just to confess one day, by the way, I'm a magician. That idea alone is enough to keep me from spoiling the big reveal, regardless of the association rules. My grandfather patted me on the head when I shared these thoughts with him. I don't know if that was praise or what, but I remember that his touch was gentle. I first learned that I would be succeeding my grandfather on the day I graduated middle school. When I returned home, there he was. Your elder sister left on a journey. From this day forth, you are the heir to the Aozaki. He said it in such a matter-of-fact way. I knew that the Aozaki family passed down this old tradition of magecraft, but to be honest, I never imagined I'd be the one to wield it. Magecraft is supposed to be passed down to a single child. It was my sister's role to take the mantle. I had no interest in dedicating myself to so many rules and routines. I planned to live a normal life. I had hopes and dreams for the future. I felt bad for my sister, but I was determined to live my life my way. And while I managed to do just that for the time, I was blindsided by a vicious counterpunch. Since then, I've been thrust headlong into a world I had only observed from afar. It was a hell of a way to start high school. But I suppose it wasn't all that bad, all things considered. A lot has happened since then. I was so dazed by this newfound life that a year of school motored right by. I was a second year before I knew it. Thankfully, nothing drastic had happened. The 6 months, my roommate and I totally tried to kill each other, notwithstanding. Roommate stuff, you know how it is. As it happens, I've got a natural talent at this magic stuff, so I've yet to have any hang-ups there either. I'm only human, so I've had my fair share of headaches for sure, but never once did I worry about my future. I thought my life would be smooth sailing all the way. If only everything had gone to plan last night.
どう?
Alice Kuonji asked Aoko Aozaki the second she entered the house. What a cutie. She's cute. Her oh god, I cannot speak English apparently. Her dark eyes succeeded where her voice failed to communicate the gravity of the situation. Alco took off her unflattering coat, hung it on the hanger, and sat down on the sofa. Alice sat across from her, with his table separating them.
そっちはよくないわね。偵察に行けるのは7個ぐらい。ここのところ使ってばかりで作り置きをする余裕もなかったし。
Alice's gaze drifted from Alco to the box on the table.
あの夜、町を監視していた奴はいないの？町の偵察は完璧なんでしょ？そいつら。
それは昼間の話よ。夜間飛行は危険が多いわ。
Oh, she upset. Meaning they were of the least use when needed the most. Alco sighed.
そういうあなたは朝は随分と強気だったけど。
ああ、こっちは予定通りよ。明日までには絞り込めると思う。今朝、飛び丸にうちの生徒の自宅と行動時間を調べさせたから、あの時間に公園をうろつくやつはめったにいないし、簡単に割り出せる。
そう簡単に行くの？
行くわよ。伊達に生徒会に勤めてないわ。その程度のデータは揃えてある。
Clever girl.
月1のバイト先はおろか、親しい友人宅との移動時間、その優先順位まで調べ上げてるんだから。人には見せたくなかったリストだけど、そんな余裕ないでしょ。だからそういうのが向いてる副会長にやらせたの。
Clever approach, actually. I mean, if you're gonna do that, you're gonna need to keep a secret. Why not develop your own information network where you're at? It's pretty clever when you think about it. Incidentally, the creation of the secret file started the moment Alco became student council president. The mere rumor of its existence was enough to strike fear into the entire student body.
そう。徹底しているわね。相変わらず。
Alice was only mildly surprised. It had been almost 2 years since they had first started living together. She knew as well as anyone that when Alco put her mind to something, she saw it through. She saw it through to the end.
ま、私もあれがこんな風に役立つとは思ってもみなかったけど。ほんと、備えあれば憂いなしとはこのことね。
But what happened last night was far beyond a mere exception to the rule. This predicament should not have been possible.
それより原因は分かったの？結界の結びに不手際があったなんてのは聞かないわよ。
No. Pressing a bit, Alco glared at her. The word was Alice's responsibility. If it was to blame for last night's trouble, Alice had to own up to her fair share. Alice and Alco may have been roommates and partners, but it was a relationship of convenience. While lineage had brought them together, they were more like enemies than allies. Ultimately, they were just not a match. Where there was a blunder, it was punished. Where there was an opening, it would be attacked. If there was even an opportunity, the two of them would kill each other in the event of such a moment. Alice locked eyes with Alco. Alco's fierce gaze could make a grown man cower in fear, but Alice did not bat an eyelash.
仮の話だけど、あの結界に落ち度があったのなら、今まで何度もこういう状況になっていたでしょうね。
Jab and counter jab. I suppose you're right, Alco agreed as the question reaffirmed her trust in Alice.
結界のあり方は完璧だったのね。
絶対とまでは断言はできないけど。
Alice answered as flatly as ever. A bounded field is like a sanctuary, sealed away from the real world. Steps are taken whereby a certain area is cut off from the outside world. There are various kinds of bounded fields, and this is going to go into kind of what I was talking about earlier when we were fast-forwarding through. There are physical ones that close off an area behind a wall, and less tangible ones that use mirrors, mist, or trees to conceal that which occurs within. However, when closing off an area to the outside world, you cannot avoid communicating the abnormality's existence. In other words, the area may be closed off to the outside world, but it is impossible to hide the fact that it is closed off. In time, someone will take an interest in a sealed off area even if they cannot see what's going on inside. Some might say this is putting the cart before the horse. The ideal field would be one that was both undetectable and impervious to interference from the outside. That was exactly the kind Alice had generated in the park the night before.
その場所に用があっても今はないように思わせれば誰もそこには立ち入らない。隠したい場所の周りに一時的な意識の改ざんを促す結界を張る。手間はかかるんだけど1時間程度の人よけには信頼性は高い結界よね。アリスの鏡を使った一級品だし途中で破れることもない。事実入ってきたのはあの人形だけだとはっきり感じられた。これで完璧じゃなかったら何が完璧なのよ。
So then the question is,
私も
how
わか
did
らない。
someone get inside?
森作りに落ち度はなかったわ。森は数日かけて栽培したものだし、今まで通り信頼できる結界よ。けど例外があったのならどこかで見落としがあったのね。
Perhaps that thing that wasn't accounted for was a strange boy from the mountains. Though Alice's words conceded the possibility, her eyes expressed her confidence that she had overlooked nothing.
参った。こうなると一番いいのはあいつが人形使いだってパターンね。
It
それ
would
な
make
らかろうじて
sense
納得できる。
if the mage
相
that
手が
was
魔
using
術
the
師なら
puppet was
結
the
界の
puppet
侵入ぐらいで
master
きるでしょうし。
who was there in the park.
問
Assuming
題は
that they needed to
侵入
close
した
by.
時の違和感をどうやって消したかってことだけど。
The thought of being targeted by this individual was pretty terrifying. If they were able to penetrate Alice's field, it could only mean that their skill in magecraft was superior to Alice's. Alice, in her current state, would be completely helpless against such a foe.
その線はないわ。
Ooh, chocolates. Sort of. Ooh, but it's not
彼
a
は部
mage.
外者よ。ムクドリはともかくロビンが後をたどれなかったもの。魔力の気配は全くなし。誰かの魔術で操られている犠牲者。
Alco was quickly running out of straws to grasp at, and that meant she was out of questions to ask. All she could do was call it bad luck and leave it at that.
魔術師の秘密を見られておまけに目撃者を逃がしたか。
The sofa groaned as she leaned back. Her gaze went up to the brown ceiling with a sigh. It wasn't much of a view. She was becoming increasingly depressed.
覚悟を決めておいて。
Ooh, serious talk now. Her roommate's voice seemed indifferent, but Alco just kept staring at the wooden ceiling.
それともあなたにできないのなら私が言ってあげてもいいけど。
The cool-mannered girl's statement carried an equally icy implication. Seems like Alco needs to be the executioner here. Alco took the words in slowly with as much sincerity as she could muster. It was like trying to swallow molten lead.
そうだ。覚悟なんてもう決めたでしょ。
The thought sounded hollow, even as it popped into her head. This was clearly different from last time. While the aim was indeed the same, the circumstances surrounding her target were clearly different. She may have been determined before, but that was as a mage. If enemies emerged, she would kill them. If she was challenged, she would step up to the fight. It was a fight between two mages, and her opponent was in the wrong. Even if this could only end in death for one of them, it was an outcome both parties could accept. Kill or be killed. Morality had no weight on this scale. But this time was different. Her opponent was neither enemy nor mage. Even if she was prepared to kill them, this person was likely not ready to die. That's why morality did factor into it now. Was she truly up to the task of murdering an innocent person? Could she swallow the fact that this was a common occurrence for a mage? Yeah, mages, by the way, if you're not familiar, are typically not very pleasant people to be around. They tend to be, how to put it politely, eccentric. We'll use that word. That's a good euphemistic word. She snorted sardonically. Being a mage did not mean that Alco was some kind of monk who could cut ties with the real world on a whim. If there was one thing Alco hated, it was doing things without conviction or an understanding of exactly why she was doing them. When she acted, she preferred to act decisively.
ま、やるしかないだろうね。
As she said it, she got up from the sofa, having had her fill of the ceiling for one day. Alco had returned to the alcove always, and Alice was done probing her.
じゃあこれ
As if to reward her, Alice produced a small bottle. It fit neatly in the palm of her hand. The bottle looked completely out of place in her slender fingers. I bet it's drugs. The glass was cloudy and it appeared empty. Oh, it's definitely drugs. Some shreds of paper remained on the front where there was once a label.
何よそれ。
Alco stared at the bottle suspiciously. I would too.
収納の
Someone gives you a strange
ち
bottle
ょう
with
ど
no
一つ
label on
余って
it.
たからあげる
You're either going to have the best trip of your life, or you're going straight to the emergency department.
はい。
名前は忘れたけど中国の小説に出てきたのと同じよ
Alco was miraculously able to parse what Alice meant.
それってレンゲ堂の兄弟の話？じゃああの赤いひょうたんと同じなわけ？言いたくないけどそこら辺の風邪薬のラベルを無理やり剥がして小瓶に見せかけてるそれが？
Suspicious. Probably should be. Alice looked at the bottle and acknowledged how ordinary it looked. She also understood she would not be the one using it as she set it on the table.
赤いひょうたんじゃなくて陽子玉の上瓶の方
そういう問題じゃない。私は魔術師としての雰囲気を論じてるんだ。
Ah, concerned about the aesthetics, are we?
些細なことを気にするのねせいろがんの瓶じゃないだといいと思う
Bottle of laxatives, huh? She made a good point.
蓋を開け
Could
て
be worse.
相手の名前を尋ねればいいからただし相手に抵抗する意志が残っている場合小瓶は割れるから気をつけて
Alco raised her eyebrows.
ちょっと待った。抵抗する意志があるとダメって眠っている時にやれってこと？
それは試したことがなかったわ眠っているのに返事をする人っているの
Untested medicine.
たまにいるけど。まあ確かに珍しいわね、そういう人。
In that case, one would have to weaken them until they were about to pass
あ
out.
そうそう薬や魔術がかかっているとその重さでも割れるから気をつけて
Ah, so you can't use a little trickery to get them to fall into the trap.
使えない。それってほとんど役立たずってことじゃない。
それは青子次第ね
Both true and a cop-out. Alice turned away as she replied, as if the topic no longer mattered to her.
はあ、アリスがこういう小道具好きなのは知ってたけどね。これも趣味なわけ？
Which that's another thing about Alice's magecraft, which we'll see. A lot of her magecraft isn't her explicitly casting spells and chants and stuff like that. Although you do see her do that. We did see her do that just a minute ago. She uses a lot of prepared stuff and items to use her magecraft. Alco asked, hoping Alice would deny it.
多分
Tabu.
それでどうするの持っていくのか行かないのか
Without answering, Alco dithered a bit before taking the bottle and putting it in her pocket. She figured she might be able to find some use for it. Two hours had passed, and the clock struck 9. Their conversation had moved from the drawing room to the sunroom, and had manifested into the kind of scene one would not expect in such a mansion.
まあ本当はね、飛び丸に任せる気はなかったんだけど。
A hot earthenware pot sat on the table. Alco spat out complaints to no one in particular as she plucked food from it with her chopsticks. Tonight they were eating a traditional Japanese meal that looked out of place in the mansion. When it came to the kind of Japanese hot pot where all one had to do was buy and boil ingredients, it was usually Alco's responsibility. Alice sat across from Alco as she silently poked at the pot with a fork.
山城のやつが来るなり、しずきくんはまだ部活に入っていないから面倒見てあげてくれないかな、なんて言ってくるもんだからさ。全校生徒の行動範囲なんて見直す気力なくなっちゃったのよ。
Seems like shop talk is over, and now it's time for the everyday, chilled out times. The egg she plucked was still as silky as a baby's bottom, so she returned it to the pot. She settled for the shirataki noodles instead. Begone! Fork.
そりゃあのバカがバイトで忙しいのは知ってるわよ。だからできるだけ春先までのんびりしてて、あんなのでも親身になってくれそうな部の部長に当たってみたのに、ありがとうの一つもないってのはちょっと尺に触るわよね。
Probably because you act like a dick.
聞いてるアリス。
As if her mouth was full, she simply nodded in response. Her expression stated that she had no interest nor opinion on the matter, but she at least appeared to be listening. I am Alice in my friend group. I do a lot of the listening and a lot of the nodding. Satisfied, Alco nibbled on some hanpen fish cake.
それに私、いい人なんて言われるやつは信用できないのよ。あろうことか、飛び丸までそんなこと口走る始末だし。あれはいい人なんじゃなくて、ただぼんやりしてるだけなんだっての。だいたいあそこまで言われて怒りもしないなんてどうかしてるわ。
Her thoughts went to what had happened in the student council room earlier that day. She remembered how non-responsive Sojiro had been to her words. His unconcerned face alone was enough for her to swallow the rest of her hanpen without chewing it.
何が分かって
I
るん
love
だ
these
な
little slightly animated scenes. It adds quite a bit of life to it. I like it. His words were a lot like those that ended her
青子
childhood.
ちゃんは分かっているんだね。それでも自分であり続けられるということはとても強いことなんだよ。
Perhaps it was meant as a compliment, but she took it as a patronizing way of pitying her. Because the person who said it had acted like she was looking at a wounded animal.
あんな変態の言ってたことなんて今さらどうでもいいけどさ。
That episode might have made her the most confused she had ever been in her life. Yet, what shocked young Alco the most was the look of pity on the face of the person she had admired the most.
喧
I
嘩
think that might be an error. Maybe it's the look of pity. The abrupt comment stopped her in her tracks.
ごめん、聞いてなかった。喧嘩ってあの喧嘩？
Alice nodded.
あなたの感想だけじゃ状況はよくつかめないけど、つまり青子はその人に喧嘩を売りたかったのね。
Alice bit into the very last hanpen. I like Alice. She's quiet, but she's quite perceptive when she likes to be. Unexpectedly funny as well. Her remark was unexpected, but completely on point.
なんでそうなるのよ。私はあんなのと1秒だって関わりたくないだけだってば。だいたいそれどころじゃないし、興味とか全くないし。
Fortunately for you,
会話も
Alco,
これ以上ないってぐらい簡潔に切り上げたし。
ならどうして今そんな話をするの？
え？それはあんたに今日の調査過程を知らせてあげたのよ。 それ以外何があるっていうの？
What other reason could Alice be suggesting Alco had for bringing it up? Ooh, salacious. It would be several hours later, in bed, that Alco realized that she had dug her own
いいけ
grave.
ど私は別に。ただ青子は本当にその人が嫌いなの？
Alice ate her hot pot in silence, as if she was honoring some sort of sacred ritual. Dinner is a sacred ritual. Her face was as indifferent as always, but she was secretly enjoying how flustered Alco was. Alco remained oblivious to this. Normally, she would have noticed immediately, but she was not quite herself at this moment.
本当にって、そりゃそうよ。気に食わないって何度も言ってるじゃない。
そう。具体的には？
は？具体的にはって、そんなのに理由なんて。
Getting pressured a little bit now, are we? She trailed off as she finally realized how disagreeable she was being. She could come up with no reason why. Her instincts had told her that she was incompatible with that hick. Hey, what's wrong with hicks? But why such a strong reaction? More than anything in the world, Alco hated emotion without reason and decisions made with no rationale. Uh-oh.
嫌いなものは嫌いなんだから、ちゃんとどっかに理由があるんだと思うけど。
She became more flustered the more she talked. Her nature compelled him to think before acting. When one looked at everything objectively, the conclusion was obvious. As much as she was loath to admit it, he really was unassuming do-gooder everyone had him pegged as.
ちょっと本気かっての。人間的に悪いところ、本当にみじんもないのか？あれ。
There was plenty, so she left it at that for now. The chopsticks she had been using came to a stop. She was getting very annoyed. An irrational hatred burned through her head. Unable to come to terms with her feelings, she desperately tried to analyze Sojiro, but her mind only went in more circles. Alice fixed Alco with a deadpan stare.
呆れた。
A small sigh.
らしくないわね、青子。
Ooh. Those words were the final blow. Alco felt the floor fall out from under her. She was unable to leave her chair until long after Alice had finished eating and left. Alice certainly knows how to put the screws on when she wants to. Now, I believe, now that we finished that scene, that is an appropriate place for us to finish off for now. I'm not sure how close we are to the end of this chapter, but this is as good a place as any. Let's go ahead and put down our save marker. And I thank you guys very much for coming out. Saw a couple of you guys floating around today while we were going through the visual novel. I appreciate you turning out and hanging out with me. And I look forward very much to the next time I get to hang out with you guys. I'm not sure what I want to do next time. Depending on how I'm feeling towards the end of the week, I'll either play some more Witch in the Holy Night, or I might play some more Star Sector. I was quite enjoying the Anti-Piracy Gang run, and I'm kind of itching to play it again, so we'll find out together. If you have an opinion on the matter, just drop a comment down below and let me know what you guys prefer. Either way, I'm planning to, hopefully, Lord willing, and of course, if I'm not too beat up from work this week, I'd like to stream either Thursday or Friday. Maybe Friday would be better. We'll find out together. If I remember, I will send out a tweet on the Twitter account for the channel if we're going live and around what time I'm planning to. But until then, guys, like once again, I thank you guys for turning out, and I hope this has been a little bright part of your day. It's certainly been mine, and it's been a good way to relax after a long day. I look forward to seeing you guys again. Till next time, guys.